The interviewer's pen stopped moving halfway through the third question, not because Marcus gave the wrong answer, but because she had already made up her mind. She glanced at his resume one more time, at the community college listed under education, at the 8-month gap in employment history, at the home address in the section of town where rent got paid weekly instead of monthly. Then she smiled the smile people use when they've already decided you don't belong. Marcus knew that smile. He'd seen it in bank lobbies when he asked about business loans, in the principal's office when he requested exemption from field trip fees, in the eyes of his late wife's family when they looked at him holding their granddaughter's hand at the funeral. The interviewer slid his portfolio back across the polished table without opening it. Inside that portfolio was a bridge design that would one day be studied in engineering programs across 3 continents, but she never saw it. She saw a single father with calloused hands and steel-toed boots applying for a position that required a graduate degree he'd never have time to earn. Marcus stood in the conference room on the 47th floor of Castellano Engineering's downtown headquarters, holding a battered leather portfolio his daughter had decorated with star stickers, watching a woman half his age close the door on a future he'd spent 11 months building in the hours between putting Lily to bed and falling asleep at the kitchen table. The city spread out behind floor-to-ceiling windows, all glass and steel, and the kind of permanence Marcus had been trying to build ever since the night a drunk driver turned his family of 3 into a family of 2. He'd been a welder then, a good one, the kind who could read a blueprint the way other men read newspapers and make 2 pieces of metal become 1 piece so seamlessly you'd swear they'd been born that way. But welding paid $13 an hour, and $13 an hour meant Lily wore her cousin's hand-me-downs and knew the difference between name-brand cereal and the bag kind that tasted like cardboard and optimism. The interviewer's name was Sharon Vega, and she had the kind of voice people use in libraries and expensive restaurants, soft and controlled and utterly certain of its place in the world. She asked Marcus about his technical certifications, his project management experience, his familiarity with collaborative software platforms he'd never heard of despite watching 17 hours of YouTube tutorials in the public library's computer lab. She did not ask about the bridge design in his portfolio, the one he'd sketched on the back of Lily's coloring pages during her dance classes, the one he'd refined using borrowed textbooks and second-hand engineering software he'd learned to run on a laptop held together with duct tape and prayer. She did not ask because she had already decided that people like Marcus built things with their hands, not their minds, and the 47th floor was reserved for people who'd followed the right path through the right schools to arrive at the right conclusions about who deserved to sit in rooms with views. Marcus thanked her for her time. He shook her hand, his palm rough against her smooth one, and walked to the elevator with his portfolio tucked under his arm and the weight of another failure pressing down on his shoulders like the steel beams he used to wrestle into place on construction sites. The elevator descended 47 floors in silence, counting down numbers the way his bank account counted down to 0 every month no matter how carefully he budgeted. In the lobby, a security guard nodded at him with the kind of recognition that exists between people who work while other people sleep, and Marcus nodded back, then stepped out into the afternoon sun that turned the city into a maze of shadows and light. He picked up Lily from aftercare at 3:45, same as every day, signed the clipboard with the pen that never worked right, listened to Mrs. Chen tell him about the picture Lily had drawn in art class. Lily came running across the playground with her backpack bouncing and her stuffed rabbit tucked under one arm, Mr. Hopscotch, the gray velveteen rabbit with one ear shorter than the other because Lily had chewed on it during the first year after her mother died when she stopped talking for 4 months and the therapist said sometimes grief needs something to hold on to. She crashed into Marcus's legs at full speed, 7 years old and 39 pounds and convinced that her father could fix anything, even things that were already broken beyond repair. "Did you get the job?" Lily asked, looking up at him with her mother's eyes, dark and serious and capable of seeing through every lie Marcus had ever tried to tell. "Not this one, Lily Bean," Marcus said, taking her hand as they walked toward the bus stop. "But there'll be others." "That's what you said about the last one." "And I was right. There was another one. That's how these things work." Lily adjusted Mr. Hopscotch under her arm, tucking the rabbit's shorter ear against her shoulder the way she always did when she was thinking. "Maybe you should show them your bridge," she said. "The one you drew for me." "The pretty one?" Marcus squeezed her hand. "They're not really interested in my bridges, sweetheart." "They should be," Lily said with the absolute certainty of a 7-year-old who believes that justice and fairness are laws of nature rather than pleasant suggestions. "Your bridges are the best bridges. The bus came and they rode it 23 blocks to the neighborhood where houses huddled close together like they were trying to keep warm, where corner stores sold lottery tickets and cigarettes behind bulletproof glass, where Marcus rented the bottom half of a duplex for $800 a month and considered himself lucky to have a landlord who didn't care that he paid rent in cash because banks required minimum balances Marcus couldn't maintain. They walked past Mrs. Patterson's house where she sat on the porch watching the street like she was waiting for something specific to happen, past the empty lot where the community center used to be before the city decided that neighborhood didn't need a community center as much as it needed luxury condos that never got built, past the bodega where Mr. Torres always gave Lily a piece of candy and pretended not to notice when Marcus counted out change for milk. Inside their duplex, Lily dropped her backpack by the door and went straight to the kitchen table where Marcus's current project occupied half the surface, a scale model of a suspension bridge built from popsicle sticks and fishing line, and the kind of attention to detail that made other welders shake their heads in something between admiration and confusion. Lily set Mr. Hopscotch on the table where the rabbit could watch, then pulled out her homework while Marcus started dinner, chicken and rice again, the third time this week, because chicken and rice stretched further than anything else, and Lily hadn't complained yet about the repetition. "Tell me about the bridge," Lily said, not looking up from her math worksheet. Marcus stirred the rice, added water, turned the heat down. "Which one?" "The one you drew for the scary building people." "Castellano Engineering. The ones who didn't look at your drawings." Marcus came to the table, sat down across from her, pulled the portfolio out from where he'd left it by the door. He opened it to the third page, to the technical drawing he'd spent 6 weeks perfecting, the bridge design that solved a problem no one had asked him to solve but that he couldn't stop thinking about ever since reading about the traffic collapse on Highway 47, where commuters spent 3 hours a day sitting in cars, breathing exhaust, and arriving home too tired to play with their children. His bridge cut through the problem like a blade, elegant and simple and completely unconventional, using a cable stay design that distributed weight in ways that made traditional suspension bridges look like they'd been designed by people who'd never actually considered what weight does when it moves. "This bridge," Marcus said, pointing to the main span, "can handle 500 cars at once. Normal bridges can handle maybe 200 safely, but this one uses a different tension distribution system, see?" He traced the cables with his finger. "The load gets shared across multiple anchor points instead of concentrating at the towers." Lily looked at the drawing, then at Mr. Hopscotch, then back at the drawing. "So it's stronger?" "Stronger, cheaper to build, and it lasts longer. The materials are standard, nothing exotic, which means any city could afford it." "Then why didn't they want it?" Marcus closed the portfolio. "Because I'm not the kind of person they listen to, Lily Bean." "That's stupid," Lily said, returning to her math worksheet with the kind of dismissive finality that made Marcus smile despite everything. They ate dinner at 6, cleaned up by 6:30, spent an hour on homework and reading before Lily's bath. Marcus sat on the closed toilet lid while she played in the tub, Mr. Hopscotch stationed on the sink where he wouldn't get wet, and listened to her narrate an elaborate story about underwater kingdoms and rabbit warriors. At 8 o'clock he tucked her into bed, Mr. Hopscotch nestled in the crook of her arm, read her 3 pages of the chapter book they were working through, kissed her forehead. She smelled like the cheap lavender shampoo from the dollar store and the specific sweetness of childhood that Marcus knew wouldn't last forever even though he wanted it to. "Dad?" Lily said as he reached the door. "Yeah, Lily Bean? Tomorrow they'll see." "See what?" "That you're the best bridge maker in the whole world." Marcus smiled at her in the darkness. "Go to sleep, sweetheart." But tomorrow came, and the day after that, and the week after that, and nobody saw anything except what they'd already decided to see. Marcus sent out 14 applications in 3 weeks, received 3 responses, attended 2 interviews that ended the same way the first one had, with polite smiles and promises to be in touch that never materialized into phone calls. He picked up welding shifts when he could, worked weekends at the fabrication shop where his old supervisor still threw him hours out of loyalty and pity in roughly equal measure, brought home paychecks that covered rent and groceries but nothing else, watched the gap between what he earned and what he needed grow wider like a crack in concrete that starts small but never stops spreading. On a Tuesday in October, Marcus stood in line at the unemployment office, filling out forms while Lily sat beside him with Mr. Hopscotch, coloring in a workbook Mrs. Chen had given her. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the kind of sound that gets inside your head and stays there. Around them, people waited with the specific patience of those who'd learned that the system moved at its own speed and complaining only made the waiting longer. Marcus filled in boxes, checked boxes, signed his name in boxes, and tried not to think about the bridge design sitting in his portfolio or the fact that he'd started sketching a second design, this one for pedestrian overpasses in school zones, because he couldn't stop his brain from seeing problems and solving them even when nobody wanted his solutions. The woman at the counter called his name. Marcus walked up with Lily beside him, her hand in his, Mr. Hopscotch tucked under her other arm. The woman looked at his forms, typed information into her computer, asked questions in the monotone voice of someone who'd asked the same questions 1,000 times before. She told him about job training programs, about resume workshops, about networking events where people like him could meet people like them and maybe find common ground. She did not tell him that the system was designed for people who'd already proven they belonged, that second chances were reserved for those who'd had first chances worth recovering from, that men who welded steel and raised daughters alone were supposed to stay in their lane and be grateful for whatever work came their way. Marcus thanked her, took his forms, walked out into the October afternoon that had turned cold when he wasn't looking. Lily hopped beside him on the sidewalk, counting cracks, humming a song from school, holding Mr. Hopscotch by one worn paw. At the bus stop, she leaned against Marcus's leg and said, "I'm hungry." They stopped at the bodega. Mr. Torres gave Lily her candy, a root beer barrel she tucked into her cheek. Marcus bought bread and peanut butter, did the math in his head about how many meals that would make, whether they could stretch it to Friday when his next shift pay came through. Outside, the sun dropped behind buildings, turning the street into alternating stripes of light and shadow, and Marcus thought about bridges, about how they're designed to bear weight, about how every structure has a breaking point that you can't see until you reach it. That night, after Lily slept, Marcus sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. He opened his email, found the automated rejection from Castellano Engineering, read it again even though he'd already memorized the words. "We've decided to move forward with other candidates whose qualifications more closely match our current needs. Translation: we don't hire people like you." He closed the email, opened his bridge design files, stared at drawings that represented 11 months of work squeezed into hours stolen from sleep and sanity. His phone rang. "Unknown number." Marcus almost didn't answer, but he answered everything now, because sometimes opportunity called from numbers you didn't recognize. "Hello, is this Marcus Webb?" A woman's voice, professional, unfamiliar. Speaking. "Mr. Webb, my name is Dr. Elena Castellano. I'm the CEO of Castellano Engineering. I'm calling about your interview with us 3 weeks ago." Marcus sat up straighter. "Yes, I remember. I'm looking at your portfolio right now, Mr. Webb. The one you left with Sharon Vega. She never opened it. I found it yesterday in a stack of rejected applications, noticed your design sketches visible through the plastic sleeve, and I opened it. I've been studying your bridge design for 16 hours straight." Marcus didn't breathe, didn't move, waited. "Mr. Webb, I need you to come to my office tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Bring every design you've ever made. Bring your daughter if you need to. We have a conference room she can use. But I need to talk to you about this bridge because if I'm reading your calculations correctly, you've just solved a problem that my entire structural engineering department has been failing to solve for 8 months. Marcus found his voice. "Which problem?" "The Highway 47 expansion. The city hired us to design a bridge system that could handle projected traffic growth over the next 20 years without costing more than the current budget allows. My team keeps hitting the same wall. Either we build something strong enough but too expensive, or cheap enough but not safe enough. Your design," she paused, "your design does both. And I need to know if you understand what you've actually created here." "I understand it," Marcus said. "Then I'll see you at 9. Don't be late, Mr. Webb. We have a lot to discuss." She hung up. Marcus sat in his kitchen in the duplex on the street where houses huddled close together, holding a phone and a future he couldn't quite believe was real. He looked at Lily's backpack by the door, at Mr. Hopscotch's ear visible from where the rabbit had fallen onto the floor, at the bridge model on the table that represented everything he'd been trying to build since the night his wife died and left him holding a child and a hope that the world could be different than it was. Tomorrow he would find out if he was right. At 8:45 the next morning, Marcus stood in the lobby of Castellano Engineering with Lily beside him and his portfolio under his arm. Lily wore her good dress, the blue one with flowers that she saved for special occasions, and held Mr. Hopscotch against her chest with both arms. Marcus had combed her hair, made her breakfast, explained 3 times that she needed to be very quiet in the office, that this was important, that today might change things. She'd nodded seriously and promised to be so quiet that nobody would even know she was there. The elevator climbed. Lily watched the numbers light up, counting under her breath. At 47, the doors opened onto a reception area that looked like it had been designed by people who believed that beauty and function were supposed to compete rather than cooperate. The receptionist looked up, saw Marcus, started to speak, then stopped as a door opened behind her and Dr. Elena Castellano stepped out. She was not what Marcus expected. She was younger, maybe 45, and she moved like someone who'd spent time building things instead of just approving designs from a distance. She wore practical shoes and reading glasses on a chain, and she looked at Marcus the way engineers look at blueprints, seeing not what's visible but what's true. She glanced at Lily, at Mr. Hopscotch, and smiled. "You must be Lily," Dr. Castellano said, crouching down so her eyes were level with Lily's instead of above them, making herself smaller so the child wouldn't have to feel small. "I'm Elena. Is that your rabbit?" "Mr. Hopscotch," Lily said. "That's an excellent name for a rabbit. I had a rabbit when I was your age. His name was Professor Whiskers." "That's silly," Lily said. "It is silly," Dr. Castellano agreed. "Come with me, both of you." She led them down a hallway lined with framed photographs of bridges, some famous, some not, all beautiful in the way that purely functional things can be beautiful when they're designed by people who care about getting the details right. They passed offices where people bent over computer screens, a break room where someone was making coffee, a conference room full of men in ties looking at projections on a wall. Dr. Castellano didn't stop until she reached a corner office that overlooked the city from two sides, glass and light, and the sense that from up here you could see the shape of the world instead of just your small piece of it. She gestured Marcus to a chair, pulled one out for Lily, gave the girl a tablet loaded with drawing apps. "You can make anything you want," Dr. Castellano said.